Namaskar. Well, friends, let me heartily welcome you all to Bhim Bhashya, my audio video podcast series on Dr. Ambedkar. This audio video podcast series has 54 short speeches on Dr. Ambedkar, unraveling as many as 25 different dimensions of his multifaceted genius. Friends, this podcast series is focused on Dr. Ambedkar, his thoughts, his actions, his philosophy, and above all, the great vision that he had shown for our entire country. This is what this podcast series is all about. So let's proceed. Friends, we are going to resume our discussion of Dr. Ambedkar as an orator. In this episode 19, I am going to talk about Dr. Ambedkar's guidance to his all followers. Throughout his public life, Dr. Ambedkar consistently offered advice to his millions of followers. In this episode 19, I have chosen 6 such speeches advising his followers on the then prevailing issues of contemporary importance. And in each speech, the focus is going to be on the core part of Dr. Ambedkar's thoughts. The first speech, which had a title, "We must demonstrate our rights through Satyagraha." This was a Marathi speech which was made by Dr. Ambedkar in the first public meeting about Mahad Satyagraha. And the date was September 17, 1927. So this is one of the earliest speeches when Dr. Ambedkar entered public life and started his first mass movement in terms of Mahad Satyagraha. In this speech, Dr. Ambedkar says, and I quote, "Untouchability is not our stigma, but it is a stigma on our mothers and sisters. Those who consider themselves touchable feel that their mothers are superior than the mothers who gave birth to untouchables. But the truth is that every woman delivers a baby after 9 months, and as such, no woman is superior to any other. To those who think that we are lesser mortals, we must demonstrate that we are no less than anybody else. From the religion's point of view, the rights of all human beings are the same. That is why we must establish this fact through our Satyagraha." Unquote. The second speech that I have chosen is the speech with title, and I quote, "Give up the old customs and establish new ones." This was a Marathi speech addressed to Panch, which are community leaders, and this was delivered in Mahad on December 27, 1927. Remember, Dr. Ambedkar is talking to the panches, which are the community leaders. So he says, and I quote, "What I wish to tell you is, please recognize your responsibility. Times are changing, and you must understand what needs to be done under the changed circumstances. We must give up the old customs and adopt new ones. Wherever people refuse to adopt the new customs, you must stand ready to use the weapon of excommunication to bring them to their senses. If you are willing to do so, we will accept and recognize your ongoing authority. Or else, we will be forced to give the charge to new punch who are modern in their outlook and are willing to embrace a new policy consistent with changing times. Unquote. So, in this speech, Dr. Ambedkar is making an earnest appeal to his followers to give up the old customs and establish new ones which are consistent with the changing circumstances. The third speech that I have chosen to present here has the title, and I quote, "We will not get human rights unless we declare war against oppression." This was a speech which was actually a presidential address at the conference of Swabhiman Saurakshak Parishad. And this was a conference which took place in Nashik district. The date was May 26, 1929. The core of this very important speech is as follows, and I quote, "The time has come for awakening about the self-respect. The overall situation of the untouchables is extremely pitiable and wretched. Simply because of a birth in the untouchable family, even the most efficient amongst us cannot do anything despite having better qualities than most of the touchables. This social system, which is entirely created by higher caste Hindus, is inimical to our dignified progress and respectful survival. Untouchables are harassed and banned from entry into temples, from drawing water from public wells and ponds, and such other social human freedoms. The untouchables should awaken their self-respect and launch a sustained movement for their human rights. If human rights were to be obtained merely because of education, then the highly educated people from the higher caste would not have committed such heinous atrocities on the untouchables. Dr. Ambedkar emphasized, we will not get human rights unless we declare a war against the oppression. Unquote. As you can see in all these speeches, Dr. Ambedkar is trying to enthuse his followers to change according to the times and getting them ready to struggle for securing basic human rights which were deprived to them for centuries. The fourth speech that I'm going to present has a title, and I quote, "They alone rise who strive." Unquote. This was a Marathi speech which was given in a public meeting in Mumbai. The date was somewhere around last week of February in the year 1933. The core of Dr. Ambedkar's speech is as follows, and I quote, "During the last 2000 years, never was such an attempt made to annihilate untouchability. The untouchables are now convinced that the demand for Swaraj and the cause of the Hindus will suffer for want of support from the depressed classes. What the Hindus do for you is not by way of charity or mercy. They do it for their own welfare as well. The mission of our movement is to fight out tyranny, injustice, and false traditions, and to undo all privileges and release the harassed people from their bondage. Our cause has gained recognition because of our ceaseless struggle. Here he is talking about the tradition of dragging the dead cattle into the basti, into the neighborhood of untouchables and eat the dead cattle's meat. He is talking about that. And I quote, "Give up eating carrion." People ask me, then what should they eat? In reply, I ask you to remember the example of a virtuous woman. She will never accept the life of a prostitute for betterment, though she falls on evil days. She suffers for self-respect. Learn to live in this world with self-respect. You should always cherish some ambition to do something in this world. They alone rise who strive. Some of you nurse the wrong notion that you will never rise in the world. But remember that the age of helplessness has ended. A new epoch has set in. All things are now possible because of your being able to participate in the politics and legislatures of this country. Unquote. The fifth speech that I have chosen has a very interesting title. The title is, and I quote, "Do not depend upon God or Superman." The core of this very important speech is as follows, and I quote, "By deifying an individual, you repose faith in your safety and salvation in the single individual, with the result that you get into the habit of dependence and grow indifferent to your own duty. If you fall a victim to these ideas, your fate will be no better than the logs of wood in the national stream of life. Your struggle will come to a naught." Dr. Ambedkar goes on to add, and I quote again, "I may add that these ideas of hero worship, deification, and neglect of duty have ruined Hindu society and are responsible for the degradation of our country. In other countries, during a national calamity or crisis, people take united action against the national calamity, ward off the danger, and attain peace and prosperity. But our religion has drummed into our ears, a man does nothing. He is a helpless log. At the appearance of a national calamity, God is supposed to descend down and save us from the danger. The result is that instead of taking united action against their enemies, we wait for arrival of an incarnation to do the job for us. Dr. Ambedkar goes on to say, and I quote him, "You must abolish your slavery yourselves. Do not depend for its abolition upon God or a superman. Your salvation lies in political power and not in making pilgrimages and the observance of fasts. Devotion to scriptures would not free you from your bondage, want, and poverty. Your forefathers have been doing it for generations, but there has been no respite, not even a slight difference in your miserable life in any way. Like your forefathers, you wear rags. Like them, you subsist on thrown out crumbs. Like them, you perish in utter slums and hovels. And like them, you fall easy victims to diseases with a death rate that rages among poultry. Your religious fast, austerities, and penances have not saved you from starvation. It is therefore your duty to divert your attention from the fasts, worship, and penance and apply it to capturing law making power. That way will end your starvation. Remember that it is not enough that a people are numerically in majority. They must always be watchful, strong, well educated, and self respecting to attain and maintain success. Unquote. The sixth speech that I have chosen is a very interesting one. In fact, it sums up Dr. Ambedkar's advice to his all followers. This was a Marathi speech which was given to the All India Depressed Classes Conference in Nagpur. The date was July 20th, 1942. That was the time when Dr. Ambedkar was about to go to Delhi to take over as a member of the Viceroy's Executive Council. In this speech, in his concluding remarks, Dr. Ambedkar says, and I quote, "My final words of advice to you are educate, agitate, and organize. Have faith in yourselves and never lose hopes. I shall always be with you as I know you will be with me." Unquote. These speeches give a glimpse of the constant and consistent dialogue that Dr. Ambedkar had throughout his public life with his own followers. Building up their morale, getting them ready to struggle and to fight, and advising them not to lose faith. Well, friends, let's conclude this session here. But before I leave, let me remind you that if you like this audio visual podcast series, like it, share it, and subscribe to it. So long until we meet again real soon. Thank you. Namaskar.